This month's Where Did the Road Go is brought to you by three amazing people, Super Inframan, Allison Cook, and 36 Dingo. If you want to become a patron or a sponsor, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight we have Mr. Red Pill Junkie.
Buenas noches.
And Super Inframan.
Hello, hello.
Also known as Saxon.
Also known as Saxon, but not the band.
Dressed in denim and leather. So tonight's going to be a Wandering the Road episode. There's a couple of random things we're going to talk about. And the first thing we're going to do is I had one more AMA question from patrons. And it was asked after we recorded the show. And it's a good question. So, what is one of your favorite tales or anecdotes of high strangeness from any area of the paranormal? The more absurd, the better. Yeah, it's a hard question, but it's also a really good question.
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think what would be mine.
Some of mine are probably some listener stories, like the people who saw like cartoon characters.
Yes.
You know, like Bugs Bunny peeping its head over the back fence, or this what was it? They were walking along, they looked back and they saw like the Scooby-Doo gang or something. And then turned and looked again and saw aliens, and then turned and looked again and saw people, and they were like, what is happening?
You know, along those lines, the ones that fascinate me like that too are like where people see their toys get up at night, you know, when they were little, and like put on shows for them.
Yep.
And I think it was a listener story where they talked about like a sort of Muppet type character that would come out of their closet.
Yes.
And that, what's really interesting about that to me is like I can totally visualize that, in whatever that feeling is of that makes a lot of sense to me too. Like, because it doesn't seem strange at the time, but when you get older, you're like, man, that was really weird.
Yes. Yeah. Red Pill, anything come to mind for you?
I have so many beloved high strangeness stories. You know, when it comes to UFOs, one of my favorite stories is obviously Joe Simonton.
Oh, yeah.
His space pancakes. I just love that story because it's so incongruous.
Well, it's so down to earth. It's just, he's very matter of fact about the whole thing. This is what happened. They gave me pancakes. Want one?
Yeah. They asked for water and I asked for the pancakes in return, you know, fair exchange.
Yeah.
And the thing that then Ballet extracted from it, when it was revealed after one of the pancake was analyzed, that it had no salt, and it kind of had a certain indirect reference to all the fairy lore that says that the fae folk had this aversion to salt. There was some way to keep them away. That's one. Another one of my favorite stories is when writers and authors meet their characters in real life.
Yeah.
There's a story of Alan Moore encountering John Constantine on two occasions, I think, at least.
Yeah, that comes up a lot on this show.
Yeah. And one of the times, I think that Constantine approached him behind his back, and has said to him, like, I'm going to tell you the secret of magic. Like any CUNT can do it. Which is like awesome. And the other one is like Neil Gaiman. I've read this some time ago. Neil Gaiman is, of course, the author of Sandman, which is now a series on Netflix, which is awesome, actually. I highly recommend it. And one of the characters in that series is the devil Coronson, which is actually part of. It's not something that Gaiman actually invented out of thin cloth. You know, is part of all these treatises and ancient books that depicts all these menagerie of demons that are that are part of have been invoked by sorcerers and magicians all across the time. And the story goes that Gaiman was in this Halloween party, and this guy approached him and said to him, "Do you have a light?" And Gaiman lent him his lighter, and he noticed that the guy seemed to have like two sets of mouths, one below the other, and he said, probably thought, it's a very cool, very well done mask. And he said to him, "Oh, that's a nice mask you're wearing." And the guy said to him, "It's not a mask. I'm Corazon." And Gaiman was probably okay, I don't know, maybe he had been drinking, maybe he was under the influence of another substance. And the devil asked Gaiman, "Am I coming back?" And Gaiman was like, What do you mean?" And Corazon said, "Am I going back to the story? Am I going to go back to the comic book," which Gaiman was still writing. And Gaiman was like, "Well, I don't know. You were just like a minor character in one of the stories. I hadn't planned to it. Well, I had this idea about another time in which we will take the main character back into the hell." And the devil said to Gaiman, "Okay, that's when I'm going to come back. So people will not forget about me. You will do this, don't forget." And Gaiman was like, "Okay."
Yeah. That stuff is awesome. And that story, that particular one, is retold somewhere, and I can't remember the location, but I've got it posted on my Instagram account where someone illustrated it.
Yes.
Yeah. And that one is probably my favorite one of those encounters. Two of the other people who worked on Constantine after more recently also have ran into him, which is really interesting that's a recurring event. It wasn't something that's just happening to Moore.
Almost like there's a tulpa.
Yeah. And then, of course,
exactly.
like Corazon saying, "So people won't forget about me." It's kind of the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one that I always love with that is Maxwell Grant, that wrote all of the Shadow pulp novels.
Yes.
And Grant was literally one of the most prolific published writers ever. I mean, he put out so much material so quickly. It's unbelievable. Google him, look it up. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like he was publishing massive amounts of material, and he lived above a pub for a while. And would just be writing, basically 24/7 because he was, that kind of crazy focused. And the Shadow started appearing in the pub, and supposedly people still see him out of the corner of their eye in that place. And you can imagine, this guy putting so much intention and being so focused all the time on this character, sort of generating, the tulpa of the Shadow in that place where he worked. Just fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One story I want to throw in with this too that I always like to go back to is y'all know Sam, the Sandown Clown?
I don't know that.
It was a really weird alien encounter, maybe. The entity in it looks kind of like a clown, though. And it was a group of kids that ran into him. And it was in Sandown, England, and he had them come on board his ship and talk to them. But the weird things with the ship were he would go to operate buttons and things like that, but there were just drawings of the buttons on. Yeah. Or stickers basically. And so there's a lot of this sort of, real and not real at the same time going on, or things standing in place of real things. It just makes the whole experience sound incredibly creepy. Almost as if the clown from It decided to pretend to be an alien for an afternoon.
Yeah, and also this idea of the Looney Tune character. I don't know, Wile E. Coyote drawing this image of a tunnel on a rock.
Yeah,
And then,
like that.
The Roadrunner actually going through the rock, the drawing,
Right.
because the laws of physics don't apply when imagination is involved.
Yeah. Those are some of my favorite sort of high strangeness things, where the stuff that doesn't make sense are there, and you have to consider, like, why does it work in one instance, but for you and I, it would just be a sticker on a piece of plastic,
right?
And not a real button or a real switch.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's sort of like some of the encounter stories, RPJ, that you shared with Josh, where the deceased relative showed up with the aliens visiting, like, the daughter and the mother, and the dad that was with them that had been dead for 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just wild. And they came walking out of a lake, I think, in, like, spacesuits.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, none of this makes sense. It doesn't fit any kind of paradigm that we have for what we think of.
No, it's like dream imagery.
No, yeah, dream imagery, but also, it doesn't fit our paradigm, but certainly fits the paradigm or other cultures. I mean,
this is true.
We all have all these legends of the lady in the lake, or the connection between the Fey folk and water.
Yeah,
it's almost and nowadays it's been, I don't want to say perverted, but it's definitely been adapted or twisted into to fit our preconceptions. So now we have all these ideas about whenever we see a UFO, like, plunging into a lake or going into the ocean, not like one of the latest episodes of Netflix Unsolved Mysteries talks about these very interesting UFO sightings happening on Lake Michigan. I don't know if it was in the late 1990s. I think it was in the early 2000s. And some people actually saw, like, a big column of water, with sounded almost like a giant washing machine operating. And the notion is that the water was being extracted by the UFO. And so now people have this conception that, there must be some kind of, like, alien base within the bottom of the lake, or maybe the aliens go after the water of the lake because, I don't know, they need fresh water for some reason. There was also this article that I just linked to the Daily Grail about this port city in Mexico, in the state of Tamaulipas. I think the city is Madero. They believe that there's an alien base in the ocean next to their town, and the base somehow protects them from hurricanes. The aliens divert the hurricanes just when it's going to hit the town. So it's now a modern myth. And something that is being, I guess probably maybe because it's something of a joke, but it seems to have been widely embraced by the townsfolk.
Wow.
I also had, I'm sitting here trying to remember his name. I had a guest on that had some really weird Bigfoot experiences, but they seemed like they were actually time shifts. And he does some really cool art too. And I'm terrible with names, and I'm not remembering his name, and I'm looking for it right now, trying to find it, but it definitely was up there on the high strangeness stuff. But I know I sent the show to a friend of mine, and of course there's so many different things I could have used to send messages that I'm kind of like, all right, which messaging thing did I use?
Which platform? Yeah.
Like, I think it was Facebook. No, it's not on Facebook. Okay. Because it's one of my favorite listener story, because he came on and talked about the whole thing, and it was just nuts. But I am not finding it, and I can't remember his name. I'm sorry if he's listening, because, if I figure it out here during the show, I'll tell you in a bit.
All right.
But cool. I am lacking it at the moment. Damn it. That's really frustrating. And I don't even know what to search under on the website, because I can't remember his name. Yay me.
But can you share with us some of the particulars of the story?
Well, it's like he was getting, like, his friend goes out into the woods, and gets freaked out because he hears him calling for him, which then happens a little bit later. And a lot of stuff like that, like they feel like something rushing past them while they're walking down the train tracks. And then I guess they heard a train a little bit after that, and they realized, oh, that was what we heard, type of thing. Like everything seemed to be out of sync. Like they were having these experiences.
Oh, interesting.
That's very interesting.
And then he had an additional one outside of that whole experience because he was associating it with Bigfoot at the time. But I'm going, but it sounds more like you're just out of sync. Like you're experiencing these events, but they're not, they're not happening like you think they are. I can probably,
I don't know. I have this idea. It's a fantasy, really. It's not something that I, really believe. It's something that I like to play with mentally in my head. Taking seriously for a minute all the story of Lazar, that Bob Lazar, and the idea that maybe there's someone who has one of these flying saucers in a hangar somewhere, and maybe once in a while they'll try to turn on the machine, but every time they turn on the machine, like the fabric of reality gets distorted, like, okay, let's make a taste for the turning the machine. Oh my God, 9/11 happened. Okay. And maybe that's the reason why they have the thing, but they never dare to actually use it, because they don't know what's going to happen if they actually turn it on again.
Alex Whitcomb, that was his name.
Okay.
So it was quite a few years ago he was on, but his story was just so weird, and I really loved it. And plus, it seems to be playing around with time, even though he wasn't looking at it like that, which to me also made his story even more believable. I mean, I believed him anyway, but when I realized that the common denominator was time and he wasn't looking at it as that, said even more that, okay, this is not saying he's making up. I generally believe the people I have on for the most part anyway. There's only been once or twice where I've been like, I don't know.
Okay.
But then again, I wasn't there, so I can't really say.
The reason why maybe we feel we don't get all of these, we are so stumped by the UFO phenomenon and other paranormal events is because we don't understand how time works.
Yeah. That is exactly it. We don't understand how any of this stuff works. Let's be fair.
I was listening to Whitley talk about, I'm trying to remember, he and Jeff Kripal were at a conference. Oh, they're at Esalen, and they were sharing a room.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
You heard it? Yeah. And they get into the idea of like, in the middle of the night, like Jeff felt like, like reality was caving in around him.
Yeah.
And, Whitley was like, that's what happens, or at least that's what I think happens when the visitors come and take us out of time. That's how we perceive being pulled out of it.
Yeah.
I think that's right? Red Pill?
Something like that. Yeah. I think that Jeffrey said when he felt it, something like, oh God, because, it was an emotional reaction. Yeah, like, obviously, trying to put this into words is impossible. But yeah, I think that you just said it. Yeah, like he felt himself out of himself, not as an OBE, but something else. Yeah.
If that's the case, like if that's really what happens from our perspective, if you were to get pulled out of time, it just tells you like how stuck in it we are. We can talk about things that understand time better than we do, that can move backward and forth in it. But it's still so far beyond us that I don't even know if we'll ever be able to understand it. We can try, but it's this is so cliche, but it's like an ant trying to figure out what a computer is.
Right.
It's just we just may never have the capacity for it.
Absolutely. I think that's very true. Right. So that show is labeled Shadow People, Time Slips, and High Strangeness, Shadow People, Time Slips, High Strangeness, and More. I put it up on August 2nd, 2020.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to check that out. He also does some really awesome art with driftwood.
Cool.
And he's on Facebook as Drifted Creation. So he creates like monsters and stuff out of driftwood, and he's incredibly talented.
That's
I'll
cool.
look that up. Cool.
But if you haven't heard that show, that's well worth going back and listening to, because it was some really bizarre stuff.
Mm.
And
I'll
some,
have to go back and listen to that.
and some weird synchronicities all as well.
Yeah. I love everything with shadow people. I'm always kind of fascinated by that because it seems like such a common experience.
Yeah. I was driving the other day and I'm like, I see something moving across the road. And I used to see shadows, like almost like the size of small animals, dart across the road. And I haven't seen it in a decade or two now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I saw one the other day. I'm like, oh, I just saw a shadow move. Oh, no, that's just a black cat. Never mind. Because it was just black. There was completely black. It was dark out. All I saw was it blotting out the light. And I'm like, never mind, just a cat.
Well, somebody shared on Twitter not too long ago a video taken, I don't know where, I think it was England somewhere. And I think that what they were trying to show in the video was something called the Bracken effect or something. I think it's something that happens when there are the right conditions of light and mist in a mountainous area that create almost like a shadow in right in the middle of your vision. You know, it almost like the shadow of a person walking next to you.
Okay.
And the video shows it so clearly. And it is really creepy, you know, because obviously there's apparently a scientific explanation for this effect, some type of, I don't know, illusion or call it a mirage, a shadow mirage.
Yeah.
But it's definitely disturbing, you know. If you saw something like that and you're all alone, you will definitely think that, you know, there's some kind of like a ghost following you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And dusk can really play with you too. I had come over a hill on a road just around dusk, so everything was mildly, you know, you could still kind of see, but it was getting kind of shadowy.
Yeah.
And there was this woman riding a horse, and she blended color-wise completely into the horse.
Oh, weird.
Ooh.
So as I came up over the hill, I'm like, that is a really tall person with a lot of hair. What am I looking at? And then I'm like, oh, it's a woman on a horse. Okay. For an instant, my brain said, Bigfoot? Is that a Bigfoot? No, not a Bigfoot. Just a woman on a horse.
Yeah.
Huh.
Then I'm like, my dash cam's on, right? Okay, I'm going to go back and look at that. When I looked at it in the dash cam, I'm like, yep, it looks like one thing at first. And then as I get closer, you could see that it's a horse.
Yeah, of course.
But
now imagine if it was the first time you saw a horse. I mean, this is the idea that the Aztecs, when they first encountered the Spanish conquistadors riding their horses, they really didn't understand what they were looking at. You know, they saw them as a single creature, you know, with 4 legs and 2 arms.
Yeah. But weren't there horses in North America at one point?
Yeah, but the time the Spanish came, they were all extinct.
Okay.
Yeah. They were like the early.
They were the megafauna probably that got extinguished at the end of the Ice Age.
Yeah.
They
were the
supposedly extinguished by the comet.
By the comet. Yeah.
Well, it was the meltdown. See, I think there's 2 events there. I think there's the comet that caused the Younger Dryas and some kind of plasma event that melted the ice very quickly.
I think that Graham Hancock now is talking about 2 comet strikes.
Oh,
yes, I think he has been for a while. But there's also evidence of plasma. That's why I go with the second one being a plasma thing. Because the secondary comet strike would just cause, I would think, another nuclear winter type situation.
Yeah. Presumably, or I don't know, depending, I guess, where it struck.
Yeah. I don't know. Shock goes with it being an outburst from the sun, which, I mean, what's interesting to me is the fact that you have all these ancient cultures who have glyphs that are plasma formations.
Right.
And you have numerous cultures around the world that all have these same exact glyphs, which means they saw these things, which means there was some kind of massive plasma outburst, and the only ones they didn't record are the ones that would have killed them to see.
Yeah.
Because there's like 6 that if you saw them in real life, like from a solar outburst, you would be dead as soon as you saw them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, there's something to that. It doesn't mean it happened then. It could have happened at another point in time, but it's certainly a contender for what would have wiped out the ice really fast.
Yeah.
So there was something else I was going to say. Oh, I had posted this, and I thought it kind of makes an interesting conversation piece. I had this dream I recorded back in September. And I'm just going to read it because it's more of a story than anything else. But like when I read back, I was putting this into my journal and went, this is actually interesting. So I said I had a dream that I was watching an exchange between the devil and various people. The devil was quite elegant and really wasn't doing anything particularly evil. Instead, he was just trying to be helpful and asking people good questions like, is this what you really want? And why are you doing that? A whole situation broke out between him and the police, who were looking for him simply because he was the devil. He was explaining to another guy that he hadn't actually done anything wrong. They just wanted him because he was the devil. He helped this guy and helped him escape the police because they were now looking for him too because he was with the devil. In the end, the devil got one cop to go in the wrong direction by playing some misdirection games, but the other cop confronted him right outside the building where the cops lived. Instead of arresting him, the devil helped him bring in his groceries. And the cop was starting to realize his mistake when his wife came home, and she was furious that the devil was there. She was telling the cop that she was going to leave him and that that was it. They were done because this guy had a sketchy past. The devil then went through everything that happened since they had walked into the building and how he had mostly just helped the guy put his groceries away. And just because he's the devil doesn't mean he's evil.
Exactly.
He just wants people to be happy, and sometimes that makes other people unhappy.
Interesting. Yeah. I always have fun with the idea that, you know, if we're in a situation of Christianity with the devil and the contemporary idea, I'm like, well, that kind of means he works for God.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's the idea. Yeah, that's the origin of the character. You know, it's, if you read the Old Testament, the story of Job, it starts with the devil walking into the court of God, you know, in the heaven, and he is being greeted by the other angels, and nobody tells him, you know, what the hell are you doing here? And God asked the devil, you know, have you been on earth? Yes, and I've seen Job and he's prosperous, but I wonder if he will be so respectful of you if his luck changed. And that's when God and the devil, they play this wager. You know, see if Job's faith and respect to God will be faltered. You know, if calamity fell on him, and well, that's the story. And I don't know, Seriah, I don't know if you've ever seen this Netflix series Lucifer.
No,
it's interesting. I mean, I love it because it's a silly comedy, almost like a romantic comedy of Lucifer, like taking a vacation in Earth because he's tired of ruling over hell, and he actually goes and becomes the partner of this female cop in Los Angeles, so they go and solve crimes and all that. But one of the things that is one of the powers that Lucifer has is whenever he confronts a person, he can ask them what is their deepest desire. You know, what is it that you truly want? And then it's almost like some kind of like he gets into their heads and they say the truth. So what you were saying reminded me a lot about that, and also one of the most interesting things about the series is that Lucifer is not really evil. he actually despises evil. He says that's why I punish the evil in hell.
Yeah, it's like it's my job.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's actually one of the most interesting things that happens that is said in the series when he confesses or he reveals the secret that in hell there are actually no locks or closed doors, that the people cannot live there because they are stuck there with their own torments. They are tormenting themselves.
Wow.
And I feel that actually, sounds really, really interesting. Probably what might happen with some people in the afterlife.
Oh, absolutely. What I found interesting about the dream, though, too, is that, here's the devil just asking people good questions. And a lot of times that's frowned upon in our society. Like, you're not supposed to question things. You're supposed to just do what you're told.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of like the devil's advocate, right? It's a way of, like, you need people to play the devil's advocate, but it's kind of derogatory because it's putting this sense of, like, you're being a burden for asking questions, that are might be controversial or whatever.
Yeah.
Or questioning tradition or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was watching this episode of New Thinking Out Loud on YouTube, and there was this guest. I guess he was analyzing evil characters in fiction, and he said that the number one commonality in most evil characters is that they are trying to deprive people from their freedom. Right? They are like suppressors of freedom. But the one major exception to this rule is the devil himself, because in the story of the Old Testament, the story of Adam and Eve, it is the devil, the one that is trying to coax Eve to exert her free will. Because it is God in this reading of the story, the one that is preventing Adam and Eve to know the difference between good and evil, and thus preventing them to exert their free will to choose between the two of them.
Yeah. Is that, do the Gnostics add on to that? Am I thinking right? It's the Gnostics that get into, the devil is
kind of the good guy.
He's the good guy. Physical reality is made by the demiurge.
Yeah.
And he's trying to elevate, the serpent to, the people there to, a higher place because, God wants them controlled.
Right.
Or the demiurge does, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also thought the last line, I didn't actually remember this dream at all. I thought the last line was interesting that, what was it there? About how, making people happy makes other people unhappy. Yeah. He just wants people to be happy, and sometimes that makes other people unhappy. And that's really true. I mean, there are people out there who are extremely unhappy if especially certain other people are happy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't affect them directly.
Yeah. There was a Joseph Campbell quote about that too, where he talked about like everything is evil for somebody. True. I think that's right. So just by virtue of you being happy could hurt somebody else.
Well, I don't know. I mean, is happiness a zero-sum game?
It shouldn't be.
Then I'm not sure. I mean, like you will say, okay, not because I want to get into politics here, but you will say, so-and-so is a billionaire, and therefore, he's happier than the rest of us. And I'm not sure that's true.
No.
I actually think that those guys are more miserable than the rest of us, and that's why they have this craving to keep accumulating wealth, because they think that they have this delusion that will actually make them feel better about themselves. But then it's never the case.
And how many rich actors and musicians have committed suicide?
Yeah,
it's not the money, I mean, certainly having enough money to get by where you're not struggling is a plus.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
But
Yeah.
For sure.
at the same time, it's not the be-all and end-all of existence. And when it becomes the be-all and end-all of existence for you, I think you're just kind of empty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
It's like, unfortunately, money's necessary. I mean, we can't really survive easily without it.
Yeah.
But like you could be homeless. It's not necessarily good for you health-wise. So, I mean, ideally, you want to be able to live comfortably, make enough money to live comfortably and still have time to actually live your life and do things that make you actually happy.
Yeah.
Well, then, okay, then we go into the particulars of what is comfort, I mean, maybe someone to have hot water and a roof over their heads and have enough food in the fridge. That is enough comfort for them to feel secure and to go about to pursue their passions and to cultivate meaningful personal relationships. But other people say, no, I won't be comfortable until I have, like, I don't know, $50,000 sports car.
Right.
Yeah. My requirement would be Wi-Fi. Like I can go live off the grid, but I'm gonna have Wi-Fi.
What would you prefer? Would you prefer to have Wi-Fi, or would you prefer to be on a cabin with 50,000 books?
Ooh.
Wi-Fi, because there's more than 50,000 books on the internet.
Yeah.
And are you going to read more than 50,000 books in your lifetime?
Nope.
So here's the caveat I would put in this is, how quickly can I find what I'm trying to look up or read about? And I would, because we're talking about money, I would want the internet of 20 years ago before everything was monetized.
But then again, why do you need the speed to? It's because I need to find what I'm looking for quickly.
Yes. RPG.
Why are you in such a hurry?
I need instant satisfaction. But no, you're right. I mean, there is a really interesting like satisfaction of taking your time and going through things. And we've talked about physical media on the show some, and making sure that you get things in physical media, whether it's a book or a TV show or whatever. I buy a lot of stuff digitally because I read in bed at night, and that is dim enough that I don't, wake up my wife.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what I read a lot of times when I read things digitally.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I keep the general gist of it, but if I read something in a physical format, it sticks with me. The specifics stand out much more, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know if I've just taught myself to scan things and I'm just stuck there now with, things on an iPhone screen or what have you.
Right. Yeah. I think the problem though, too, with people who have too much money is that they get stuck on that being their happiness.
Yeah.
Because they were in that illusion, or they've been raised to believe this is what makes you superior. This is what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
They were taught that they needed to win the game.
Yeah.
But they were not taught what to do once they won the game.
Yeah.
What comes next, and that's when they find despair, and that's when they get into cheating their wives or whatever. 100 years ago, that's why all these bored noblemen in England were joining the Golden Dawn on all these other secret societies, because maybe now I can find some new interest in magic. Now I can find ways to smite my enemies instead of just winning them.
Yeah.
And when it comes, like you mentioned, someone needing to be happy by getting a $50,000 sports car or whatever, or $500,000 sports car, there's a level of balance. Like things, possessions inherently aren't bad. It's the overvaluation of those possessions.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like my friend Christopher Ryan, is the guy who has the podcast Tangential Speaking, and he also wrote the book Civilized to Death, which deals with all these things that we're talking about. He said in one of his podcasts that $100 bottle of wine tastes just as good as a $5,000 bottle of wine.
Right.
You know, and if you actually need to buy the $5,000 bottle of wine just to enjoy wine. You really don't know really what you're doing. You know.
Yeah.
You're a little lost at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
I met a guy years ago that I still see occasionally, and I'm not going to give out any specific details of him or anything like that, but he has a particular historic actor that he loves, and he has more money than anybody I've met otherwise. And so he will go buy stuff that belonged to this actor and not even look at it. He puts it in storage.
Oh.
And it's just the acquiring, and it's sort of like,
yeah.
You're not even enjoying what you're spending all this money on. Like, man, I could have lived for years off of what you've spent on that guy's car or something that,
Yeah.
And it's all kept pristine and tucked away. And you're like, you're ruled by these things instead of these things being yours.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's weird to see. And the other interesting thing about him is I don't know if he's ever done anything on his own, like build a doghouse or anything like that, because he can just pay people to do it. And so, you miss out on the satisfaction of like, I did that,
right,
because
right.
for you, it's just, you're changing the numbers a little bit on the massive number in your checking account. Or whatever.
There's definitely things I prefer to do myself for the satisfaction of figuring it out and seeing, like, am I capable of doing this? But then there's other things where I'm like, I wish I could just pay someone to do this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like that.
Paying for convenience is a good thing. I totally get that, too. For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to fix my AC or anything like that. I've tried. It was a mistake.
Yeah. I don't feel my masculinity bruised if I don't know how to fix something in my car, or if I don't go and use my hammer. I say, well, maybe I can just pay someone, to do this, so I can just relax and read a book.
So here's my fixing my AC story.
Okay.
So I had in-wall unit, and I went to turn it on, and it's just over the winter, it just got black with mold inside it.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, that's going to have to go. So I'm going to have to open this up and see if I can get to all that. And they're literally styrofoam inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where all the mold was. So I had to open it up, cut the tape. So I took it outside, cut the tape, got the whole thing apart, cleaned all the mold out. As I'm doing this and spraying bleach on it, a storm is coming in. And I'm going, oh, good. So I'm like blowing the bleach. The bleach is hitting me in the face. I'm like, oh, that's probably not a good thing. Okay. And I'm like rushing, trying to get this thing clean so I can get it back in the window before this thunderstorm hits. And the thing, of course, doesn't want to go back together, because air conditioners are one of those things that once you take them apart, they don't quite fit right again. And I'm like duct taping the hell out of it, going, okay, all right, I think that should do it. And I got it back together. Finally, like the screw holes didn't want to hold up. Lightning started to come in. I'm like, oh yeah, great. And I get it back in the window just in time before it was already raining, but then the torrential downpour hit just as I got it in the window and got everything sealed up, and then it worked, and it's been fine ever since.
Okay.
Awesome. And I'm like, so that was an experience. Okay. But
tell me you were at least using goggles or something to protect yourself.
Of course not. Why would I have done that?
Dios mío.
I didn't expect it to spray me in the face. It was one of those things where as I'm spraying, the wind suddenly picks up, and I'm like, I was bleach in my face. Okay, cool.
Válgame Dios.
It's like, yep, tastes like bleach. All right, great.
Jeez.
I mean, it was diluted. It was like one of those sprays. It wasn't pure bleach, luckily.
Yeah.
I did go in right away and wash my eyes out just to be sure.
Yeah. Like, it burns. Well.
So yeah, air conditioning. But yes, I would rather not do that again. But hey, I did it.
You did do it. Yeah, sure.
I fixed it, because otherwise I was going to have to buy a new air conditioner, and I didn't really want to do that. And I still have it to this day. It still works.
Well, I mean, that works then. I mean, there's nothing better than when you actually repair something and it turns out to be reliable and lasts.
Exactly.
You're like, I didn't have to fix that again. Thank goodness. Like, all right.
Yeah.
That's one of the first reasons I get somebody else to work on my car. Like, yeah, I know how to change oil. I used to do that in college, but you know what? I'll let somebody else work on my car because they're an expert at it and I'm not.
Right.
That's
That's the other thing. I have friends who know how to do stuff, who are experts at it, and I'd be like, I could do this. It'll take me 5 hours and it won't look that great. Yeah. Or I could have my friend come over. He'll do it in 10 minutes and it'll look 10 times better than anything I could do.
Yeah, and you'll trust the work more.
Yeah, exactly. But also watch him the whole time. Be like, okay, oh yeah, I wouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, my mailbox detached from the bridge that goes across the front ditch, and it was at a steep angle. And I'm like trying to get like screws or something to hold it together, but I didn't have enough pressure to pull it together. And I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I got to get the mailbox up somehow. So I wrapped a chain around it, and I kept wrenching the chain until the mailbox was sort of upright. And then I just nailed the chain into the bridge.
Oh, there you go.
And when my friend came over and looked at it, he's like, what did you do? And I'm like, I took a chain, I wrapped it straight now. And I'm like, it's sort of straight. He's like, well, this isn't the right way to do it. I'm like, but it worked.
Yeah.
It achieved the purpose I needed, which is to get the mailbox straight. And then he went and did it the right way for me. So I started reading, briefly, Kenneth Grant's Hecate's Fountain.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I remember the things I like and don't like about Kenneth Grant. This actually has one of my favorite quotes in it, which is Arthur Machen. I always don't know how to say his last name. Machen. And in one of the opening pages, it says, I believe there is a perichoresis, an interpenetration. It is possible indeed that we three are sitting among desolate rocks by bitter streams, and with what companions? So in here, he mentions a lot of connections to UFOs and the occult, which I don't remember. Like, I read this book back in like 93. And in doing my autobiography, I'm up to 94 now, and I mentioned reading this, and it was pretty good. And I went, I don't really remember it. But there's a couple of things in here I wanted to mention, if I can find them here, where he talks about buzzing and like here he's talking about Chinese mythology. A spirit similar to the Chin San Ku appears in the form of a toad or frog. Both are batrachian, and the Ophidian forms are familiar to sorcerers as totems of the deep ones and of the great old ones. And this is the stuff I don't like, that he's constantly pushing Lovecraft stuff in there. It is worth noting here that the Ku, like the UFO, seems to avoid populous areas. It lands or earths itself in deserted regions. Another similarity with UFO lore is that the occupants of some crafts sometimes abscond with various parts of the human body. The ancient Chinese were compelled to embody their observations in a magical context for want of terms to describe phenomena of extraterrestrial origin. The insistence on insect symbolism is highly significant in view of the humming sound believed to herald the proximity or advent of the old ones.
Interesting.
It was there's yet another type of Ku, Ku. It was fabled to excrete gold and silver and to dart about nocturnally like lightning. A great noise causes it to fall. UFOs are also said to fall in a great rush of sound. Furthermore, it may be a snake, toad, or any other kind of insect or reptile. It is kept by its votaries in a secret room and is fed by the women. However, it is formed of pure yin, which is a figurative manner of saying that it is a vampire Ku which lives on menstrual blood. Okay. It is also said in this connection, the Ku which devours men will excrete gold, and that which devours women will excrete silver. There was another part to that, though, that talks about UFOs. Let's see. Nope, that just goes down and eventually turns into him quoting numbers. Because he likes... what was that?
I was just going to ask, what culture was that again?
He just says China.
Chinese.
China. Okay, I thought I knew something like that from the Philippines, but
No, I'm sorry, I take that back. He says cult of the Ku, which originated in Southeastern Asia.
Okay, let's see. Interesting.
But then he says here, did he say China? No, maybe it was Southeast Asia. But go ahead.
How are they spelling coup?
KU with a little it's not an umlaut. I'm not sure what it is. A little mark above it that's like a triangle pointing up.
Oh, wow.
At least in the way he's doing it. But I think this was so this was a quote from Parsons. We live a symbol of what we know it is, and finally transcending the symbol, become one with it. This is the wisdom of the cavemen that we have lost. It was their sanity. The lack of it is our madness. We no longer know how to act, and having lost the symbol, we have lost the reality.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool.
You know, I think this is one of the reasons I like chaos magic and sigil magic so much, because when I was doing anthropology, and I should clarify, I know I talk about it a lot. I did not finish my anthropology degree. I didn't finish my thesis. I ended up with a business degree because, of course. But, you know, when you start looking at language and how it influences the mind, and you also think about developing language, you know, it starts with symbols, and even our concept of like time is related to how we write. There are certain languages that don't really have tenses to them. And there's even ones like some of the Australian indigenous languages can kind of be, all the words can be arranged in just about any order you want, and the meaning is always still there. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. But it tells you how much symbol is ingrained into how we operate, how we think. It's kind of like the base code of, you know, our intelligence. And so it makes perfect sense to me that symbols have power, more so than a word in a lot of ways.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Terence McKenna used to say that the world was not made out of atoms. Was made out of stories.
Ah, nice.
You know, and that's definitely true. And I once wrote something, trying to find it here, about how the movie Arrival, you know, was so great because it talked about how, you know, it was this alien language that changed your perception of time.
Yeah.
You know,
wow.
Because reality is a lot more fluid than we realize.
And there's actually a Native American language, trying to find it, that actually has a different way in which they use or how they approach the subject of time. So the language really changes that perfect perception in people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's so obviously. I guess one way it will be interesting, you know, I don't know if it's ever been done, how one could analyze a culture by the way or the lack of the scarcity of language or the scarcity that their language shows when trying to describe things. Like, you know, there's a typical idea that Eskimos or I don't know what's the politically correct way to talk about this. The people living in
Inuit.
The Inuits, exactly.
Yeah.
They have like, I don't know, they say like 50 different words for snow.
Right.
And in ancient Egypt, I think there's like 4 or 5 different words for describing different aspects of the soul. Right. There's the ka and there's the ba. And there are other words that describe different aspects, like, I don't know, the astral body and the life force of the body or whatever. And meanwhile, and this is something that our friend Joshua Cutchin tried to approach in his latest book, Ecology of Souls. Our culture only has one word for describing like what remains of the person once the body is no longer functioning, which is soul. It's, okay. It's almost like trying to go into the ocean and saying that all the creatures that are living in the ocean, you use just one word, fish. You see an octopus, that's a fish. You see a whale, that's a fish. You see a seal, that's a fish. You will be, if you use that approach, you will see, well, that's a terrible way to try to understand, the ecology of the ocean. And you say, well, how is that? We are trying to understand the ecology of the afterlife using just one word, soul.
Well, it's also how acquainted you are with something, So to be an Inuit, and I don't think they actually have 50 different words for snow, but they have 50 different designations or something that indicate snow. It's not so much just, that's this type, but there's something else to it. It's more complicated than that. But still, your point holds that because they're dealing with that on a regular basis, they're going to evolve more precise language to describe it.
Yeah. Some of the different languages that linguists have looked at in anthropology, depending on where they live, say like you were in the rainforest and the Amazon, there might be a lot more words that describe different shades of green. Because there's so much green, and they can look at those things and actually see the different shades, but you or I would probably not be able to discern the differences, even if we knew what the words were,
right?
Because we didn't grow up with that approach. And I'm always kind of fascinated by that because it tells you how much language programs are perceptions.
Yeah, there's even this conception that apparently, some scholars say that in the time of the ancient Greeks, they didn't see the color blue. You read the Homer poems about the Iliad and the Odyssey. There is not a description of the ocean the way that we will describe it, the blue ocean. No, they describe the ocean as having the color of wine,
Oh, interesting. Wow.
So people say, okay, so didn't the ancient Greeks actually perceive, colors the same way we did?
Yeah, it's possible they didn't.
It's possible they didn't, yeah.
Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Check out wheredidtheroadgo.com. You will find an archive of every show, right back to the very first one that aired January 26, 2013. There's links to all of our social media, Discord, Facebook, the Facebook group, Twitter, YouTube. You can pick up merch at our store that is linked on the page. You can become a Patreon and get extra content every month for as little as $3 a month. You can leave a donation, go through blog entries, and you can contact us. If you have stories you'd like to share for a future listener stories episode, stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com is the place to send them. For general contact, it's contact@wheredidtheroadgo.com. And if you want to mail me something, you can do so at P.O. Box 444, Ovid, New York, 14521. I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons, because without you, this show would not be what it is. And I want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Chuck Shutters, Leanne Cherry, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, a blue second gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Lemona, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Christopher Ernst, Craig Cicernos, Billuminati, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., Empty K., Eric Todd, J., James Lattimore, James Lindsay, Jim Pyre, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, MJ Armstrong, Jim and Sophie, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Oli Andre Olar, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Philosopher of Mirrors, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Stacy Sherwood, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Verosh K., Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Stephen D., Amber Hall, and Craig Sagastumi. I thank all of you for the incredible support. You're listening to Where Did the Road Go? And I'm here with Red Pill Junkie and Super Inframan, a.k.a. Saxon. And we've been talking about stuff all over the board tonight, which is the best way to do a Wandering the Road episode, which is what this is.
Yeah. So, we're talking about language and things like that and how it affects your perceptions. I've wondered about this sometimes in relation to high strangeness. Because, we say sometimes once you have an experience, it makes it easier for you to, you have more after that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
I almost wonder if when you perceive a high strangeness event or whatever, it's breaking the language programming in your brain or freeing you from it some. So your perceptions aren't as defined by what you've been feeding it with language, your entire life, and lets you see a little bit more of what's going on beyond what your brain thinks you need to survive.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's very much it. Our perceptions are based partially on what we need to survive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But even in simple forms, like my same friend who helped me with the bridge when we were putting lights up in the performance studio, we were running them up through the ceiling. And I said, yeah, I tried to get that one into the beam, but I missed. And he's like, that's not a beam. I'm like, what do you mean it's not a beam? And he's like, that's I forget what they're called, like when the boards, when the beams go across the thing. He gave me the proper term for it. I'm like, right, a beam. And he's like, okay, what's that one over there? I'm like, also a beam.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's he's shaking his head. I'm like, look, to me, they're all beams. They're thick wood that I should drill things into as opposed to the sheetrock.
Yeah. There are professions in which they are very particular about their terminology.
Right.
Sometimes
Because he does it.
It's just
Because he does it professionally. That was, those were important distinctions to him, but not to me. And plus, I had fun messing with him.
Yeah, that's always fun. I love when you have two engineers next to each other. And one of them goes, well, I'm an engineer and I think this. And the other guy goes, well, I'm an engineer and I think that. I'm usually like, okay, I'm going to leave this conversation now.
So yeah, when I was mentioning the stuff from Grant here, like what I like is that he does dig up some really interesting stuff. I mean, if you read through his books, you're guaranteed to find some fascinating stuff you've probably never seen anywhere else. But then he just goes so much into trying to turn all this stuff into like making Lovecraft real.
Okay.
And I don't know, it just feels like it's forced. And the other thing he'll do is break down to, making numerological connections between a ton of different things. And it'll be like 2 or 3 paragraphs of, oh, this equals this and this equals that. And that number means this. And then this equals this. And when reversed, this number is the same as this number. And you're going, okay, all right, sure. And then at some point in this book, he says he does that for like a paragraph. And then he goes, just because these numbers, match up doesn't mean anything necessarily, but it helps in the practice of magic. And I went, okay, sure, But that could get a little bit old quickly.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm trying to look for one of the rituals he talks about in here. Like he's talking about what's her name? Cameron. She worked with she was briefly the wife of Parsons.
Oh, yeah.
And it says, it's worth noting in this Lovecraftian context that Cameron lived as a child in the northern part of Wisconsin, which is a region associated with the Cthulhu cycle of myths through August Derleth. The region contains a lake which covers a gate to the Mauve Zone, which is what this is interesting. So the Mauve Zone, I didn't catch this the first time I read this, but it's like that zone, it's that area between our reality and imagination, where things are real but not real.
Oh, cool. Is it MAAB or
MAUVE?
Oh, Mauve. Okay.
Mauve, yeah. And I was looking for the actual quote in here where he talks about that, but I'm trying to remember what that's called in demonic reality, what the term he uses. Imaginal.
Okay.
Right.
We're saying it's not just imagination, there's substance to it, but it's also not physical reality. So he calls it the Mauve Zone, which covers the gate to the Mauve Zone, to which the snake cultists, directed by Michael Bertouax, I think, resort at certain times of the year in order to invoke the deep ones. So, like, it's interesting, but it's almost like you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
But he's talking about these rituals, and he's giving you these rich descriptions of this unbelievable stuff that's happening. And then at some point he stops and goes, I want to be clear. This stuff wasn't happening in physical reality, but we were all seeing the same thing happen in this sort of like trance state. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, now this seems a little more believable.
Yeah.
So, and I think all of this
fan fiction-y. I like it.
Huh?
It's a little fan fiction-y for Lovecraft. I like it.
Yeah, sort of. And I guess his stuff has been republished, so it is more available now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In talking, like he's talking about the word stele means stone. The Greek form of the word CTHAHI suggests Cthulhu, a point made in the Shanglecraft edition of the Necronomicon. The stela has become associated generally with the stone commemorating the dead. In the Egyptian ritual, the stele is more precisely commemorates the undead or the shade. The word also suggests stellar connection, hence the astral shade. In the Necronomicon, Cthulhu is described as not dead but dreaming. He exists as a shade at astral levels. So it's interesting. It's just, again, almost grain of salt-ish with some of his connections and the way he, adjusts things.
Sure. I mean, we could talk it from a symbology kind of way. Like maybe Cthulhu is a symbol or a metaphor for something. Like maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not too much into Lovecraft, but maybe you could say, maybe Cthulhu is a metaphor for the singularity. There's so many people trying to bring about the singularity, try to bring about this merge of man with machine, try to get these algorithms that are, you could say they are sleeping, they are dormant because they're not truly conscious, and to try to wake them up. Maybe that is something like almost like the rise of Cthulhu.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then he says, in Crowley's Rite of the Star Ruby, mention is made of a stone in which the star of the six is fixed. This may be an indirect reference to the, that's a word, hexaconathelios, or 60 stone, known to certain Cthulian entities described by the histographer Solinius. They dwell in remote secret places and celebrate foul mysteries on savage hills. Nothing they have in common with men save the face, and the customs of humanity are wholly strange to them, and they hate the sun. They hiss rather than speak. Their voices are harsh, and not to be heard without fear. They boast a certain stone, which they call 60 stone, for they say that it displays 60 characters, and this stone has a secret and unspeakable name, which is IXAXAAR. And then he goes, the number of this unspeakable name is 333, which reveals its connection with the Coronazonic current and which relates it directly to the Liphoth, which is the shades on the other side of the Tree of Life. This stone possesses a function similar to, but much greater than, that of the averse pentagram, which evokes the denizens of the Liphoth. In the Mayan languages, IX is a feminine prefix. Gerard observes that IX enters into the names of lunar goddesses, hence the antipathy to the solar current. Furthermore, in one instance, it denotes the jaguar, which Mayan symbolism equates with the demon. IX also enters into names for the moon in languages that have preserved their anachronisms to any major degree. Thus, we have the ideas of IXAXAAR expressed through a formal mythology, which equates them with the moon, the female, and the Lithoth. Crowley investigated the Kabbalistic properties of the word Cthulhu, or CTHAHI, in 1921. In May of that year, he noted in his magical record a disturbing experience which he describes as follows. I tried hard to resume sleep for a few minutes, and was the prey of a hallucination of a most alarming kind, hearing a muffled knocking in slow cadence as if deep in the earth right under my ear. This phenomenon has been known to indicate proximity of the great old ones. Also at this period, Crowley noted that during the rituals performed that year, he and other celebrants at the Abbey heard alien voices. Maitland and I both heard during the Mantra to Pan tonight the voice of an other, and not any of the human celebrants of the orgy. We have all of us on several occasions heard alien voices. I especially recall myself being echoed for 2 complete lines of the anthem. Leia once heard a voice, she told Crowley, which compares with a human voice somewhat as your magic bell does with any other bell. Several of us have seen more or less physical things of various kinds, and there have been 2 poltergeist phenomena of a minor type. After an invocation of Hecate, Maitland saw Hecate almost as a solid figure with open eyes. She was in a black robe with a very white face and gold crown. I myself getting astonishingly close to trance every time I do a new pentagram.
Huh.
Yeah. So like I said, it's definitely interesting stuff, but you see how it kind of like just weaves in and out of like Lovecraftian stuff. Like he just really wants to tie all this stuff into like one net of like magical otherworld.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's some really interesting stuff in his books. Have either of you read his stuff at all?
Not really.
No, I've meant to actually. I have the book you're talking about, but I haven't read it.
So what is the connection between this and, I don't know, the UFO phenomenon?
He just occasionally brings UFOs into the picture. Like he shows like similarities, saying that some of these entities are what UFOs actually are.
Sure. Okay.
So he talks about particularly Lamb, which of course people have compared to a gray alien, being, an extraterrestrial. In the beginning here, he says, with the publication of this volume, the wheel has come full circle. The magical revival contained a list of the names of certain entities mentioned in Crowley's Al Vel Legis, which I think was Book of the Law, were compared with those appearing in the Necronomicon, which latter, according to Lovecraft, was entirely a product of fantasy. More than a decade ago, in an article appearing in Man, Myth, and Magic, I suggested a common source for both of these books. The idea was taken up by various editors and compilers of grimoires, and no less than 4 versions of the Necronomicon have been since published. It is not therefore surprising that the present book touches again and further explores the affinities and identities lurking behind the shadowy masks of these 2 sphinxes. It also indicates some of the more pertinent researchers of ufologists who suggest, perhaps with more likelihood than that even they might care to admit, that the entities visualized by Crowley, Lovecraft, Castaneda, Birchwick, and others really do exist somewhere and at some time, and that they occasionally put in an appearance here on Earth. So he takes all that stuff and then kind of twists some of the comparative UFO encounters type of stuff in there.
Well, I mean, you could say that if he's using the Lovecraftian mythology as a framework, and obviously the Lovecraftian mythology is totally fictitious, but at the same time, kind of like so many people believe in that, or so many people are interested in that in a way they are making it real. Like, for example, the Necronomicon, just obviously Lovecraft came up with that, and it's obviously a work of fiction, but so many people were obsessed with that they are actually trying to come up with, actual books that they sell as the true Necronomicon, which is bogus, obviously.
Right.
But reminds me of, there's been in the history of ufology hoaxes that are so elaborate, so complex, and that have been carried away or believed by so many people that definitely get a life of their own. Like for example, the Umo story that is not that well known in the United States, but definitely had a lot of impact in Spain and other countries back in the 1960s and 70s. And it was totally fictitious, but you almost feel like the fiction leaped into reality when you see that there are actual cases like the Voronezh landing in, I want to say 1991 or 1990 in Russia or Soviet Union back then, in which a bunch of kids in a park saw these entities, like a giant with 3 eyes,
right,
and a little robot, and they actually saw the symbol, that was connected to these letters that were supposedly sent by these explorers or visitors from the planet Umo, and it was later revealed that the whole thing was a fabrication. But this guy, Jose Luis Jordan Peña, was kind of like sick bastard that lived in Spain, connected with a lot of weird stuff, even sadomasochistic kind of manipulations. But it begs the question: why is it that this fiction ends up like infecting or being injected in what seems to be real cases? What is the difference between, what is the line between fiction and reality? There's something that I guess people that are comfortable with high strangeness, like we are comfortable with admitting that the line is very blurry indeed. It is not as black and white as the skeptics and also the people who are proponents of the ETH as the explanation for the UFO phenomenon would like them to think it is.
Well, also the fact, a lot of Lovecraft's ideas came from dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they were essentially fiction, he may have been picking up on something deeper and more symbolic.
Yeah, he was tapping into something.
Yeah. And even Castaneda, Castaneda's been valuable to both you and I, Red Pill.
Yeah.
A lot of, and it's been shown that he likely wasn't exactly having the experiences he said he was. But he clearly studied enough of the actual shamanic rites and stuff to come up with something that actually worked.
Yeah.
So it is hard. And when you see like I think it's the first time power was taken out in a car by a UFO was actually in fiction.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then it happened in real life.
Yeah, and I think the first time that the idea of a UFO causing a massive blackout in a city was depicted in a stage play.
Okay, all right.
What? Okay.
Yeah, that it was like a message to humanity.
And if we wrap back around to the beginning of this, where people were seeing and interacting with fictional characters that they created, it all kind of makes one nice big circle.
Yeah.
But it's even. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, I thought Red Pill. I thought Saxon was going to say something.
Okay. The only thing I was going to throw out there, it was just something that Red Pill made me think of. But you remember, I always kind of wonder how accurate this was. The hysteria when War of the Worlds played on the radio. And have you all ever listened to that?
I've heard bits of it.
The actual, no, not really. Just some pieces.
It's done in like newscasts, interrupting radio programs and things like that. It's very, it's not like there's actors on the, other side just acting this out. As a story, it plays like something's really happening. And that's one of those things where I'm very curious about how many people heard that and not only had panic, but saw things. And I wish we could find documentation or go look for it to see if it caused some, entities to appear for certain folks or other high strangeness events during the broadcast, because I would assume that it probably did.
That's a good question. I never thought about that. Yeah. Probably.
And that was not an EVP a moment ago. That was me hitting the wrong thing as I was looking for something. I'm usually pretty good at not keeping any sounds on my phone, so if I accidentally hit the wrong thing, it doesn't make any noise, but apparently the volume was up. I apologize. I also didn't find what I was looking for. But we are out of time for right now. You guys stick around and do a Patreon?
For sure.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, Red Pill, where can people find you?
Well, they can find me at the Daily Grail, dailygrail.com. They can find out all sorts of wonderful articles written by me or Greg Taylor or other contributors. You can also find my personal website, absurdbydesign.com, it's kind of like a gallery of the artwork that I've done over the years and other links to interviews such or roundtables such as this. And, I'm in the process of finishing the Ufology Tarot project.
Yay!
hopefully, knocking on wood, hopefully, within the next weeks, we will be able to announce that it's finished and we'll be in the process of printing and shipping the cards and the books to our wonderful Kickstarter backers.
Awesome. And Saxon, where can you be found?
I lurk around the Discord some. Instagram and Twitter these days I use a bit more, but if you're looking for me, I'm under Super Inframan, but I always mention Saxon somewhere in my little bio or something like that. So that's how you know it's me.
All right. And it's usually a red robot.
It is usually a red robot, yes, with big eyes and horns.
All right. Thank you both.
Gracias.
There is, of course, a Patreon segment with this, and we continue our conversation there. And if you want to become a patron, it's only $3 a month, and it helps us out greatly. It also helps if you rate us highly on any podcatchers you listen to us on, and of course, share the show with your friends who you think might be interested. In case you missed it, I also put up a video-only podcast on our YouTube channel with the Snake Brothers. We actually recorded it back in September, didn't get around to putting it out till Black Friday, technically. And it's their presentation about their trip to Egypt, and it's fantastic. It's also 3 hours long. So if you want to sit down for an interesting exploration of Egypt, there you go. As always, you can find everything Where Did the Road Go related at wheredidtheroadgo.com. All right, and I will see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.